You're supposed to say you're Paul Williams, but
Oh, no,
that's
all right,
Paul
okay.
Williams.
All right, thank you, director.
In the 1970s, before there was this guy, or this guy, or even this guy, there was...
Paul Williams!
Paul Williams!
Paul Williams!
Mr. Paul Williams!
Okay, maybe you remember him and maybe you don't, but when I was a kid, I really wanted to be Paul Williams. He wrote Evergreen for her, and Rainy Days and Mondays for them, and The Rainbow Connection for this guy. I made the film because I was a huge fan of Paul Williams when I was a kid, and for a long time I didn't hear about him. I just assumed he was dead, and one day I went online to buy one of his albums, and I got a link to one of his fan websites, and I saw that he was still alive. I was like, oh my God, there's Paul Williams, and look at him. He's older. He looks good. And what's he doing? And he was playing a Native American casino in Connecticut. I was like, this isn't right. This guy was one of the most famous guys in the country. I mean, people should know that he's out there. And that was the beginning of my journey to make the film.
Mr. Kessler showed up with a camera and said, I'd like to make a film about you. And I went, okay. Wasn't sure that I wanted to poke the bear again. I had a life that I was really comfortable with.
What I realized when I was making this film was that the most important story about Paul wasn't the story about who he was, but about who he is now. And so I realized that I couldn't make a purely, coolly objective story, that it really didn't serve the story well. And so in the end, I kind of lost some of that, but what I got was, I think, a documentary that feels a little more like a film and hooks people in emotionally in a different way than most traditional documentaries do.
I describe it as he went from stalker to brother, and we wound up with a film that I think is probably unlike what you set out to make. I think it does what he set out to do. He wanted to make maybe a younger audience aware of some of my music and the like, but I think the film's about a lot more than that. I think the film's about gratitude. I think the film's about trust. I think the film's about somebody who survived an addiction not only to drugs and alcohol, but an addiction to celebrity.
Some people probably don't even remember him now, but in the 70s, he was one of the biggest songwriters there was. He wrote hits for The Carpenters, Three Dog Night, Helen Reddy, David Bowie, lots of people. But he was more than just a songwriter. He was also this huge celebrity. Every year he was up for an Oscar, or a Grammy, or Emmy or something, and he was always guest hosting or guest starring somewhere.
Mr. Paul Williams!
At the very beginning, he said, if you don't love something, we'll take it out of there. There are scenes in the film that are really hard for me to watch. When I'm hosting Merv Griffin and I'm just a little fried on cocaine, it's the most vapid, shallow, arrogant little bastard you're ever going to see. Why would anybody want to know more about that person? So in the film, you actually see me watching that footage and going, this cannot be you can't use it, you cannot use it. But then I saw his first cut of the film where he did include that. And if the film is, you're an alcoholic when you misplace a decade. The 80s were gone for me. And the 80s were full of activities that were occasionally caught on camera that I wouldn't want anybody to ever see. Those years are gone unless I use them. And what he gave me is an opportunity to take footage of that time period, and hold it up and say, this is how bad it was. This is what my life is like today. What my life is like today is I have a great relationship with my wife and my family. I'm still productive. I'm the president of an organization of 430,000 members where I can fight for their rights as music creators. This is the life I have today. It was that bad. But look at the life I have today, and it's because of the gifts of recovery. So for me, it's a big film about recovery. Jim Henson asked me to come do the Muppet Show. I went over and I've got felt in my DNA. We just connected. I never had more fun in my life working with a creative team. They were going to do a Muppet movie, and he said, come do the Muppet movie. I brought Kenny Asher in to write the songs with me, and the next thing you know, we're writing for a frog sitting in the middle of the swamp going, why are there so many songs? It's just a gift, an absolute gift, and he was one of the most wonderful creative men I've ever met in my life, but he was also the least controlling. He said, write the songs, I'll hear them in the studio, Paul. Fabulous. So I was first a member of ASCAP. As a songwriter first, I'm a member of ASCAP. ASCAP's a member organization. I was elected to the board 12 years ago, then became vice president, and I'm in my second term as president. It's the greatest honor I've ever been given.